and welcome to Community Matters, a podcast from the Canadian Association of Community Health Centres. I'm your host, Hilary Leblanc. On this episode of the podcast, I am joined by Delaney Ward, nurse practitioner, and Don Martin, executive director at Regina Community Clinic, a CHC in Regina, Saskatchewan, and Amy Pan, community programmer and SNAP project lead at NorWest Co-op, which is a community health centre located in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Through the Systems Navigation Access and Partnership, or SNAP project, CHCs are increasing efforts to improve health and social systems navigation access, to strengthen Canada's healthcare landscape and eliminate health disparities while improving population health outcomes. How are you all doing today?
Good. Thank you, Hilary.
Hi, good. Glad to have you all here. So Don, I will start with you, and I will highlight that we have had the pleasure of talking to your community health center and talking to you before. So if anyone wants to learn about what the CVP project was that you did with us, they can look that up. But for anyone who is hearing about Regina Community Clinic for the first time, could you please let us know about your CHC, the community you serve, and the programs that you offer?
Yeah, for sure. I'll just do a quick overview. So we are a cooperative primary health care center in Regina, Saskatchewan. So we serve Regina and surrounding areas. We have approximately 8,500 patients that we serve. And we have family physicians, we have nurse practitioners, including Delaney, our lovely nurse practitioner, online today. We have registered nurses, social work, counseling, x-ray. We have a lab collection so that people can get their labs here. Nutrition and exercise, but we also offer education programs and mental health group programs, and we're looking to do more of that into the future. I think we're unique simply because of the cooperative nature of our clinic. We have 4 cooperative healthcare clinics in Saskatchewan, and all of us have actually been in business for over 60 years. And so, and we are all primarily funded by the Ministry of Health.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Don. It's nice to have a cooperative and now NorWest Co-op as well. So yeah, I did a good job pairing you both together. And I did forget
For sure.
Right? I did forget to highlight that Amy is here, but just won't be on camera because of some tech issues. But for anyone watching, if they're wondering where this other fourth voice is coming from, it is coming from Amy. And I will let you, Amy, go ahead and tell us a little bit about NorWest Co-op, the community that you serve, and the programs that you offer in Winnipeg.
Yeah, hi everyone. So NorWest Co-op, it's the first co-op health in Winnipeg. So we serve all of Inkster area, it's a pretty big, I guess it's kind of hard to say, but it's a very big block of the city. We've been 50 years running, started off with 5 staff, and now we currently have 160. So a lot of our staff members, we have everything ranging from primary health care, so dietitians, nurses, doctors, physiotherapists, to counseling. We do a lot of counseling services for the community, and we also even have a daycare as well. So we actually have 2 daycares that we run. So we are really quite dispersed in what we do. We currently have 8 sites and 3 resource centers. We also have about over 45 different programs that address the social determinants of health, from financial empowerment to employment. We have a lot of cultural activities, leadership development. So yeah, that's just to kind of name a few about the different programs that we have.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So Delaney, I'll throw it to you next. As we've previously mentioned, Regina Community Clinic was able to get some funding for their SNAP project, which I believe at this point unless you were able to continue, I know the reporting has wrapped, and it was very difficult to do podcasts while in the reporting time because everyone was like, why are you talking to me? I'm trying to do work for you, which is really fun. But I would love to hear about what your SNAP project was, what you were able to achieve, and what kind of impact your project has been having so far, Delaney.
Sure. So basically, I started at RCC in October, and they had already sort of submitted the proposal, which was to looking at increasing access to mental health supports and how could we sort of better that here. So My background, I'm a pretty new NP. I trained in Toronto. I'm from Manitoba. And so I was new to Saskatchewan coming here. And so a big challenge for me was just figuring out what supports we had in Regina, what that care looked like in Saskatchewan, and what kind of what are the referral streams, what are the resources that we use, what are the resources that are good, and what, that kind of a thing. So essentially, my kind of the direction that I took after talking to some of the physicians and NPs, as well as Dawn, Chris, our management team, was to figure out better streams of support and quicker access to mental health care. So what that ended up looking like was figuring out sort of the things that we were doing well, and then figuring out different areas that we can improve on. So some of the things that we found was that there was certain areas for screening that we could have done better on. So the Canadian guidelines right now recommend against universal screening for mental health concerns, but they do recommend screening certain populations that are more at risk. So those would be like youth, chronic pain patients, patients with somatic complaints that aren't really explained by something else. So, like functional abdominal pain, headaches, things like that. Maybe there's a mental health component. And then certain people that are at higher risk. So recent losses, addictions issues, things like that. So we worked in a way of sort of putting the screening in place for those patients. And then the other problem that we came up with that was that if we are doing more screening, then you'd think we have more patients. So what do we do with that then? We have to make sure that if we are identifying problems, we have the capacity to meet that need. So what we figured out was that basically the doctors and the NP, so if they are screening an appointment that's not for mental health, but is for something else, then how do we make sure that they can be seen in a reasonable time frame? Because sometimes we're booking out as far as like 6 weeks from now. So that kind of developed over time was that the doctors or NPs would message me and say like, hey, this is my patient. I found that I think that they might have depression. They need a little bit more digging and figuring out how we can connect them with resources. And so what happened is that I have a little bit more availability, especially on Thursdays, so they can be booked in with me within the week or the next week. So then I'm able to give them like quick access to care and some continuity with that. And basically they are just saying, we have an NP who specializes with mental health. She's really good with knowing resources and how to connect you. And she can kind of give you targeted sort of interventions based on your needs. So that's been really good in that sense. So that's part of what this is looking like right now. But on the back end of that was me figuring out what resources we have, what are useful, and then figuring out how to connect patients with those. So we have, like Dawn said, counseling in-house. So that's been a huge, huge, huge help because we can get people in right away. And regardless of whether or not they have benefits, it doesn't matter because we send them up. So we also try to prioritize patients that don't have EAP or work benefits because people that do, obviously we'd like them to use their benefits and so that we can use those spots for people that don't. Yeah, and then another thing that Dawn sort of spoke about is we do have a men's mental health group here, which is quite popular. They meet once a month. And I don't know the ages. Dawn, do you know the ages of that? Or is there an age?
No age. I mean, it's adult.
Right, yeah.
But there's no limitations after that, I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's led by he is a psych nurse, and they basically it's very just casual. They meet kind of in the evening, and we did also have a youth mental health group as well that wrapped up April. So that was when we're looking at adding more. So some of the areas that we recognize that are in need would be, we have a lot of refugees and immigrants that come to our clinic that are giving care here. So mental health in that specific population, continuing mental health group for youth. And then new moms was one thing too that came up quite often. And so that's something that we are looking forward to in the future. And in terms of impact, I think we've heard a lot of positivity. So because our project isn't really quantitative in nature, it was hard to sort of evaluate like, oh, we've helped 46 patients, et cetera, et cetera. So essentially we just sort of have stories from patients and kind of feedback. So I think patients have felt that they appreciate the fact that they have really quick follow-up. So they go from doctor to me to then following up with me and getting connected with care. And so right now I've had some patients who have like graduated from me, so that they've seen me, I've connected them, they're doing really well. And then they're sort of managing their health on their own. And that was sort of the goal, was to help them to have self-supported management so that I can connect them with tools so that they can do that on their own, which is great. So that's kind of where we're at.
That's amazing. John, I want to know if you have anything to add, but before, I just want to say it's interesting to hear how like you went from nurse practitioner to like a community, like cross-cultural broker, community liaison, or this person who's doing all this connecting, even though you weren't even from there. And I think that that's so interesting how wraparound care works in this model, that you end up juggling so many hats, but learning in the process yourself. So that's really cool. John, did you have anything you wanted to
Delaney identified all of it. I think the really critical part here, though, is in a smaller community and a limited health system, is making sure that we are utilizing and not duplicating resources that are already out there, and that we can connect people to. And that's, to me, that has been a huge part of this. But also, I think it's the flow of patients within the clinic and giving them access to somebody, our social worker counselors and Delaney, to meet their needs sooner, because we do have a wait list on our counseling, and we want to get to people as quickly as possible and identify those resources. So that's exactly what Delaney has done with this project, and it's worked out so well. And I think it will be a massive building block as we go forward and organize our mental health services and hopefully grow those.
Amazing. Thank you. And Amy, I'd like to hear from you now about NorWest Co-op SNAP project, and what you were able to achieve with what your project is and the impact it's having.
You serve a very large portion of, I guess, a big part of our city. It's all of Inkster. And so because there are so many people like that are high need within that area, we try our best, but it's hard to, reach everybody and give everybody that time and that they deserve, right? So something that we have been kind of lacking was giving that more one-on-one support. Obviously, people coming in for like more trauma related, more counseling related stuff, we try to help them in any way we can. But so I guess kind of going back to, we started the SNAP project. We have 8 sites, but we started the SNAP project at 3 of our resource centers. So the resource centers, I'm not sure if you are really aware of it, but we do lots of programming. We give harm reduction. We offer primary care, counseling, all that stuff. So for the people, say, coming in for, one-on-one, or no, not one-on-one, but like more coming in for harm reduction, or I guess more social connections, tech support, more minor things like that, it's hard to give them all those things when we are dealing with more of a crisis and from other people. So because of that, we really need volunteers to kind of give them that support that we may not be able to give them, or that length of time that they need. Before COVID, we had a decent amount of volunteers, but since COVID, we've been declining in terms of volunteer participation. So this has kind of been like the gateway to kind of start off with that volunteer again, and having people focus strictly on the volunteer part and making a good training program so that people are kind of more educated and they want to stay in kind of what we can do in terms of that. So we wanted a better model, basically. We really wanted the volunteers to be a lot more engaged, and not just to show up. And we wanted them to have more collaboration within our programs, and to kind of explore a more customized, integrated model that would improve the access and service that the community members are getting. So one thing that we've started doing with volunteers is that we kind of focused on students in secondary schooling. So more specifically, social service students, so students in social work, things like that. And so we know that would give them kind of that extra experience that they need, but also they are learning that in school. So we knew that that would be good for them in the long haul to get that experience out there. So yeah, so we were successful in getting actually maybe like a good amount of students that were interested. And so because we got the students coming in, we were able to provide them with extra engagement. So again, more one-on-one interactions, extra support. Also their ideas on, potential programs, new initiatives, and we've had more volunteers than we've had in a long time helping out at our sites. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And did you want to add anything as well to maybe why implementing this volunteer health ambassador program was so important to the clients of NorWest Co-op?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, they definitely got more access. So for the staff ourselves, we were able to provide more time for those, again, like needing more crisis and who needed a lot more support from us than those who were just coming in for, again, the social support or like harm reduction supplies or food related inquiries. So because of that, the volunteers were able to give them that more time, and they were able to kind of take that, I guess, that stress away from us so that we could focus on other people who kind of needed it a little bit more, who needed more of our time.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Delaney, for the mental health care and resources that you were able to sort of track down and hand out to your clients and those clients who graduated, or could you explain a little bit maybe why that was so important to them as well? And if you happen to have any testimonial handy or anything you can remember from what the impact was.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I ended up getting like actually like a huge I mean, it's not entirely conclusive because there's always going to be more things, but I put it into like a Word document, and I have spoken either like phone call or email to most places just to make sure that everything was still accurate online, because a lot of things came up during COVID, and I wanted to make sure that they were still going. So basically collected all that. I had this cumulative list. I also put together like a 2-page, just like sort of my favorites, but also what I've heard from patients that they liked, that was accessible, easy to use, and like not too cumbersome in a sense. So what that would look like was that we have two I guess services in Regina. One is called Family Services Regina, and the other one is called Rooted Connections, formerly Catholic Family Services. They offer free rapid access counseling. So that's an option for patients who need counseling sooner rather than later, who are maybe on our wait list, but can use some bridging help. And then some other resources online and in person, depending on what the person needed. And so I actually printed that out and gave it to every provider here just so that they had quick access. And I kind of went over it in a meeting just so that they knew what it was. So right now, what we're actually working on, because we have some grant money left, and because sort of my researching time is done, is we're adding a tab onto our website, which is www.reginacommunityclinic.ca. So it's going to be called, we're working on the title, but basically mental health resources. So it's going to basically be interactive, and just depending on what patients need or are looking for, they can access it. And the good thing about this is that this is easy for us to actually use in office. And so my hope was that, if our patients here and we've kind of talked and gotten into things, and I'm like, you know what, I think this would be a really good resource for you. I'm going to show you how to access it. So I'm going to open our website, go right to it, and be like, here, you just click here, and this is going to take you right there. And beyond giving this specifically to our patients, this is also accessible to anybody online, because it's free and it's open. So that's nice, because a lot of these resources, most of them are free. And they're mostly free too. There's a few that are just Saskatchewan specific, but a lot of them are just Canadian. So that's nice for patients. In terms of sort of like success stories, I've had a few patients who have done some follow-up with me after doing some resources. And it's, number one, they like it because I either book half an hour or an hour, depending on what their needs are. They like that because I feel like I do a little bit of counseling in my appointment, and they feel like they were heard and that I understood what their issue was and then sort of what they needed. And so I felt like the care plan that we created was specific to their need versus like a 15-minute, which I mean is pretty common standard 15-minute appointment. And it's hard to kind of get into things, especially vulnerable wise, because I feel like it takes people a little bit of time to sort of like open up, which is totally fair. So I found that with that, my interventions are tailored more specifically, and then they're more likely to be successful. So I've had a few patients who have had some stressors as they are getting older with losses of spouses and things like that. So we've been able to connect them with grief support groups in person, resources online, counseling, and a lot of things that they just didn't even know existed. And you'd be surprised. I have a lot of seniors who are very savvy with technology because of COVID. So that's been really cool just to like be like, okay, you have a tablet. Okay, great. Do you feel confident? Yes. Okay. We're going to try this website. We're going to try this. So that's been really good. And then typically like I'll book follow up, but depending on kind of sort of how significant their needs are, but usually kind of get them to the point where they're self-sustainable essentially. And then kind of let them be, and then just let them like, come back, see me anytime, but I think you are doing great. And the cool thing about that is that some of the newer guidelines are saying that they recommend self-supported management as treatment for sort of mild, moderate anxiety, depression. So we're sort of helping to like promote that, which is really cool. I've had one other big issue that we have in Saskatchewan is that we have a central intake for youth and child psychiatry. It's a really, really, really long wait, and that's publicly funded. The cost of private is astronomical and really not affordable for many families. So something that Don and Chris have done before I came here, which is awesome, is that through university, I'm not sure if it's University of Regina or University of Saskatchewan, but they have it's called CanReach, and it's this program that's like a virtual internship. So some of our doctors have completed it, and it helps them to have extra knowledge and expertise in treating like ADHD, autism, diagnosing, and giving them extra knowledge and just like confidence in that. And so right now, what's been happening is if I see a youth or, sort of like 11 years plus that I'm like wondering about maybe something like going on that's maybe a little bit more complicated than just, sometimes behavioral issues, something a little bit more complex, I'll just actually send them a message and just say, hey, can you see this patient? This is what I think is going on. I just want your input into like diagnosis and then management. So for me, that's huge. And for all of us, because that saves them a year of wait time, a year of potential struggle and things like that. And we get them started on treatment and things right away. So that's been really good for me because I've seen a few people who have got to see some of our docs that way and sort of bypass that whole long thing and got them going, and they're doing really well now. So that's something that's really cool.
That's awesome. John, did
Yeah.
you want to touch on any of that?
No, Delaney did a great job on that.
Perfect. Delaney, I will stick with you since you did sort of already touch on the successes. I wanted to know if there were any specific challenges in implementing the navigation tools and how are those addressed? And if you had any other more general, successes of the entire project.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just trying to think. I think, yeah, and I think it's funny, like I think like word is getting out a little bit. So it's cute too, because I mean Regina's big, but not really that big actually. And so like I've seen like a mom, then I saw her daughter, then I saw her husband, then I'm seeing some of her extended family, and they're like, oh, they told us to come see you because you were really helpful. So that's cool. And it's a nice compliment for me because I feel like I did do a lot of work just trying to like figure out all these resources, and not just for the patients, but it helps me to be a better provider too. So that's been really good. And then so we have a seniors group here that's run by one of our counselors and then one of our athletic therapists. So once a month I go up and do a talk about different things. So I've done one on mental health, and so through that I've also been able to see some patients who have had like concerns that have come up, like, hey, I met you here, can I come see you? I'm like, yes, please come see me. So I think just like figuring out how my net is wide, and I want to continue catching those people, especially because we know, especially for male patients, when they come see you for mental health, it's usually pretty bad. So how can we intervene before it gets really bad? Because, interventions are easier and treatment's easier before we're at a severe level. So that's something that I'm considering kind of moving forward. But I think this just implementing sort of more of a screening piece, knowing that we have somebody that can see patients right away is huge, because I know that talking with some of the docs, they had said, like this patient probably should be screened. But at the end of a 15-minute appointment where I'm already running 25 minutes into it, I'm nervous to do it because who's going to see them? I can't see them in a reasonable amount of time. So I think that's been huge. And I've gotten a lot of referrals from docs just being like, hey, can you follow up with this patient? And it's great. So that's been a huge success. And I think just like figuring out how to just see more patients and get the word out that, like, having concerns with mental health is common, but it's not normal, and you don't have to live like that. We can help you sort of get better and give you those tools that you need. And yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. I also think that I don't usually give compliments in podcasts, but I think that your energy must be very, very helpful. I think that a lot of people get really bogged down by how difficult this work is. And we've had episodes around like staff burnout, even the like trauma that nurses and people get in this role when they're dealing with certain clients. And you seem very like you're a very positive person. And I'm like, oh, you remind me of my therapist. Like I would just have a vibe being like, I am struggling, but things are going to have a better outlook when you're able to talk to positive people. So like very big kudos. I think that that must be very nice for the clients.
I think, you know what, it's important too, because I think I struggled with mental health when I was like in my first year of university. And I had my own family doctor who like delivered me, and nothing that he did was wrong. It was just like that was really hard for me to talk about that with him. So I feel like if it's sort of more casual and you're just like, okay, well, how are things going? Like then it's like a little bit less like scary.
Yeah.
And then it can just be a conversation. It doesn't have to be clinical. You just sit in the chair by my desk. You don't have to sit on the back bed because that's kind of scary. You can just sit and we can just have a conversation, you know?
Yeah, it definitely makes things feel less dire as well, I assume, for the person. And it's less like this is an issue or I'm in crisis. It's more a chill convo. So that does make a lot of sense. Thank you. Don, did you want to chime in on anything?
No, I just agree. I can speak from personal experience. My daughter actually saw Delaney and never felt like she was heard before that. And she just came back and saying, like, I could just talk to her and she understood. And so certainly for that age category, I think it's really critical what Delaney has just mentioned there is just have that conversation, right? And just hear them. And, the physicians, as Delaney mentioned, when you only have that time and you're already busting at the seams, it's sometimes difficult and not dismissive. They don't mean that at all, but people feel the rush. So they're just kind of like, I'm not going to talk about that today, So Delaney's done a great, great job of opening that up and giving the physicians additional help too.
Thank you. And Amy, so let's going back to NorWest. What challenges did you have to sort of figure out and work around while working on the volunteer health ambassador program, and how were they addressed? And also all of the success that was able to come from your SNAP project.
Yeah, well, for one, I also like to say kudos to Delaney. I feel like it's, seeing a healthcare provider, sometimes it can be very nerve-wracking, but when you have someone who's very non-judgmental, who's very understanding, and is almost like comes off as like a friend, like that's what she kind of comes off to me as, like we're like friends. I think that definitely that can build a lot of that trust that maybe some community kind of has gotten away from. So yeah, kudos, thank you. Yeah, so kind of back to the question of the challenges. Again, there's been some challenges in the sense that because we kind of recruited volunteers from secondary school, that was difficult in the sense that based off of their busy schedule, based off of exams and jobs that they also had on the side, they were not able to come as maybe as much or as consistent to the sites. So it would kind of change every so often depending on, how much they need to study, where they needed to go, classes and whatnot. So I would say that was kind of like the biggest deterrent for some people who were consistent. Also, a lot of them, because we are located in the north end of the city, a lot of the students came from the south end of the city. So, location and transportation was an issue. So because the consistency was not there, I would say that community members were not able to build as strong of a rapport with certain volunteers. Again, we were able to have some consistent ones come, so they were able to build strong ones with some, but just not with others. And also because we were not able to consistently rely on the volunteers, again, that kind of pushed a lot of stress back onto us because we weren't really exactly sure what the day was going to be, right? So it's like we weren't able to give the time needed for certain people, especially that extra support. And So that kind of, yeah, it was the unpredictability of people coming in that I think was kind of the biggest stress for the staff and for the community, because they were not able to get those services. However, for those who were able to come in consistently and who were able to help the community members, I would say the successes were that we were able to build capacity within our community members because they were able to give them those services that they didn't know existed, right? So extra services that maybe we were not able to spend time with them staff wise because we were dealing with other things. So things like they were also able to help with social isolation with the community members. So if they wanted to come and say they needed tech support, but we also know again social isolation is a big problem in our society. So instead of just coming in and giving them that tech support or harm reduction, we were able, or the volunteers were able to actually spend extra time and talk to them and get to know them and hear what they had to say and kind of make them feel more valuable in where they were and who they were. And then again, like even though we were not able to get consistent volunteers at times, we were able to. So those who were consistent, they were able to build strong rapport with community members, and the community would come in specifically to talk to those volunteers. We also had a lot more diversity on our team, just because a lot of the people who were volunteering were from diverse backgrounds. So a lot of them were from Africa, Asia and whatnot. So it was just kind of nice seeing that there were different colors and different races and different faces and cultures that kind of represented the community members that maybe were not always present at our sites. It also built more trust within our organization because community members felt like they were heard and that they weren't just kind of, not that we would ever like rush them out, but again, like, because we're dealing with so much um, I was like bigger problems in a way, right, with other people, with other community, with more trauma, right, related stuff. We were not able to kind of build that trust with the people who came in for like the littler things and building trust as in like spending that time with them and talking to them. But yeah, so I would say one of the biggest successes is just community members were coming in more often and seeking our services. And then in terms of seeking services, and they were also able to we were able to promote our programs and they were able to take part in those programs as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. And I'm curious if your CHC has like the ability to sustain this project after the work has, I guess, technically now sort of completed, or what the plan is for the future.
So, it was not just me working on it, it was my other coworker who's no longer with us, but her name is Caprice. So Caprice and I, we worked on like a training manual because before we did have volunteers coming, but it was kind of, I would say more, it wasn't like there was no training that was really set in place. So we kind of really worked on the training, the manuals, and stuff like that. So because we were able to have more of manuals and training set in place, I think that's really going to help with future volunteers coming in and kind of having like a more like structured training. And so again, like the pilot was kind of like we were working with university students, secondary students, but because, as I was saying before, because of their scheduling, it was hard for them to kind of sustain their volunteer work. So the next step in this would be to focus more on community members, because I think it is important that they become involved and kind of stay more connected to our sites that way. And also because we had a lot of students volunteering, we attracted a lot of people who were asking like, oh, who are these new staff or these new people? And so we were able to also promote our volunteering as well to community by saying, oh yeah, like this is so-and-so and she's volunteering from this and that. And then we kind of would be like, oh yeah, like this volunteering opportunity is set in place if you want to volunteer and kind of build your resume, get more experience, things like that.
Awesome. Thank you. And Delaney, so it sounded to me like some of this is being sustained, but the resource list is completed. So I'm curious as well, from your perspective, if this is going to be able to be sustained by Regina Community Clinic and what that's going to look like in the future.
Yeah, for sure. So I think next step, and we had a meeting last week with the web designer who we use for our website. So Sort of like step one is sort of getting their resources online for us. And then step two, depending on sort of cost and things, is sort of more of an interactive piece of the website. So looking at implementing like a GAD7, PHQ9, which are screening tools used to kind of help with diagnosis and sort of just identifying if there's an issue with depression or anxiety. And they're sort of weighted questions. And so what that would look like based on results, and it'll say like, based on these results, here are some resources we recommend. We also recommend that you make an appointment with your family physician, NP, to talk more and get connected with your healthcare team. So that can sort of help. We're figuring out casting a wider net in a sense of like, once we can, because the piece of connecting, like I know what I can do for patients. I just have to get them basically. And then, yeah, resources are collected. I think moving forwards, we're going to continue with our sort of referral process. So send to me, I can see, follow up, go from there. And then we also are sending to our other physicians that have extra training in sort of those things I mentioned with adolescents and youth. And then moving forward, I think the next steps as well would be looking at other mental health groups. So meeting outside of, and those are open also to our patients as well as community members. So looking at accessibility from a greater perspective, because we know that there's a large population in Regina that doesn't have a family doctor and doesn't have a clinic. So how can we kind of provide broader services that are more equitable, I guess, to like all community members? So yeah.
Thank you. Dawn, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just I think a couple of things. The funding enabled us to have Delaney here and doing this work. We wouldn't have done it otherwise, and so we wouldn't have been able to do it. It's really important, I think, for us to build on that and to sustain it and to keep these resources sort of evergreen. And I think my job now is to figure out how do we do that. And with Delaney's help into the future here, we're going to try to figure out, I think, what the next steps are there. And we've been lucky enough to be able to track some funding down to hire Delaney permanently. But she's going to be doing a lot of clinical work for us as well. And this particular project work, we'll have to figure out how to build that in on the day-to-day, and just make sure that this doesn't get dusty and that we just keep, moving towards some of the good stuff that are there and continuing to build those pathways that Delaney has created. And I think that for me is what we need to make sure that we're sustaining and making it embedded in how we're providing services here at the clinic in this area of mental health, and again, just building on that and hopefully getting, much more robust approach as we move forward.
Awesome, thank you. And you did sort of lead into the next question as well for you, John, which is what would increased federal or provincial investment allow for your community health center to achieve, whether it's within the SNAP project or just for Regina Community Clinic as a whole?
Yeah, I think I started down that path. That would enable us to, so we're always constantly, especially with our clinical resources like Delaney, it's about providing that care to patients. And right now we've got some movement on our physician, we've got some vacancies, and we've got a lot of pressure on our providers to provide primary health care. So in order to keep these kinds of special projects, or I would say future looking projects going, we need to have that kind of sustainable resource that can actually keep an eye on that and continue to embed it into the organization so that it doesn't just become something on the shelf that was really nice to do, but now we're moving on or moving back or whatever. We want that to continue because the work and the resources and everything that Delaney has done has been incredibly positive for providers, for patients, for the clinic. But we want to get it out there and continue to have it working for patients and for people that need it in the community. What that looks like ultimately, we don't know all of it, but we know that it's going to be driving what we do into the future here in the short term. So that kind of additional funding, right, would allow us to shore up the resource that would be necessary to stay on top of that and to keep pushing that, with Delaney's help.
And Amy, for NorWest Co-op, what would increased federal or provincial investment allow for either the CHC to achieve or for your SNAP project to achieve in the future?
Yeah, so kind of going back a little bit about the sustainability of the work as well, I was going to say that, now that my work is my role is done in this a little bit and Caprice's role is done, we have noticed how important it is to have an actual volunteer position come out where they're paid and it's their actual position, right? That's their job, is just to recruit volunteers. So now because of that, we actually do have a volunteer position that's available, because we do recognize the importance of that. So I think because now we have that role set in place, having extra funding would then help us, so kind of help the volunteers that are coming to maybe help train them a bit more in terms of not just, like training them on the manuals that we created, but more training in terms of things like taking assist, taking actual training that they can go to outside of our workplace. And that's going to really help them understand more of the community members and what they're dealing with and the struggles. And also because we are kind of now more focused on recruiting volunteers from a community perspective, we do want them to, like when they are volunteering, that they understand what everyone's like their struggles and what they're going through, and maybe in terms of when they're going through training themselves, then maybe they can also kind of seek that help from that training themselves as well. We would also, our sites are also not that big, so having things like buying more technology like computers and stuff like that could also help, because then we could have more usage for community members and searching things that they need for themselves, like services, programs, and we can help them build, say, their resumes, or help them with applications and stuff like that online that maybe we don't have that technology currently to do because of the limited amount of space that we have.
Thank you so much. And thank all three of you for this lovely conversation. It was so great learning about your diverse projects, but both similar co-op-y vibes. I really enjoyed the chat. Delaney, you already mentioned the website, which was great, because I was like, oh, good, I already know it. But if you'd like to mention it again, and any other maybe social media or anywhere else anyone could learn about just the general work of your CHC, because I know that you're going to have the resources available soon for everybody on your website.
Sure. So our website is www.reginacommunityclinic.ca. So REGINA communityclinic.ca. Dawn, do we have social media? We have some social media, right?
Facebook.
Yeah, we do. We're on Facebook. We're not we're not vast out there because we're struggling on that side as well on communications. But yeah, we do have a Facebook page as well, and so people can sign up to be members of the Regina Community Clinic as well, because we are cooperative. We do have members, and that way we do send bulletins out as well, talking about all of our projects and services and additional things. So if people want to sign up to be a member, they can track us through that mechanism as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And Amy, if anyone wanted to learn more about NorWest Co-op or about the SNAP project or any other info, where would they go?
A website, but I would say there's not much information about the SNAP project, because our project is more volunteer based, like that's what we're recruiting. So when we do kind of promote the volunteering program, we kind of do more so like during posters, or we'll put it on our social media as well, if we are doing so, but a lot of it I would say is kind of word of mouth to community members so far, and kind of posting it around our sites and kind of neighborhood places.
Perfect. I'll mention the website because it'll show up on the screen. So it is norwestcoop.ca if anyone just wants to know about your community health center and the amazing work that you're doing outside of these SNAP projects were, again, so wonderful to learn about. Dawn, Delaney, Amy, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you
for having us.
Thank you for listening to Community Matters, a podcast from the Canadian Association of Community Health Centres. To learn more about our association and the important work of community health centres across Canada, go to www.cachc.ca.